Okay, everyone. Well, look, I think we might start kicking things off as a few more join at the last minute. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Calland. I'm chair of the PRCA Crisis Communications Group, and I'm delighted to be joined by Matthew Hare-Scott and Ishtar Schneider, who are the co-chairs of the PRCA Health Group. This is actually the first ever joint event between the health group and the crisis communications group. So we're delighted to get such a strong turnout. And obviously it's an extremely timely, topical subject that we're all here to discuss and hear about this evening. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our two fantastic speakers for this evening. We have Duncan Gallagher, Europe and CIS Crisis Practice Lead at Edelman, and Harold Craston, Strategic Lead, Health, Nutrition and Wellbeing at Google. Before I hand over to the chaps, just a little bit of housekeeping. Just to say, as I think we're all used to these days in the era of Zoom conferencing, if you can please keep your microphone on mute just throughout the presentation aspect of this evening, that would be much appreciated. However, you can post messages or questions in the chat function. And after both the chaps have done their presentations, we are going to be opening it up to a Q&A. So without further ado, as I say, I will now hand over to Duncan. Duncan.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us all on this first event of bringing the crisis and the health teams together. Thank you for joining me on your Thursday evening. As was sort of pre-publicised, what I wanted to talk to you really is really go into some detail into what the world looks like. We are in an unprecedented situation. And so this evening, I'm just going to go through a bit of a situational analysis in terms of where we believe we are. I'm going to share with you some latest thinking. Those of that you know Edelman, we have our trust barometer, and we've just recently conducted a new cut of that, particularly looking at this. And there's some quite interesting findings in there, which I think for all of us who are looking to communicate on behalf of our clients or for the organisations that we work for, hopefully I'm going to share with you some interesting insights that you can take away and help maybe form some conversations in terms of what your next plan is. And then hopefully inspire some good food for thought and some questions. So moving on, in summary, I think my colleague Ishtar is going to drive us forward. So sort of like the next slide, as I said, is that these are the areas that we're going to look at, talk about trust. What actually is the role for business and brands in the new environment we face ourselves in, and then some thoughts and insights, and actually what does a good plan look like in terms of communicating in the new world. So moving forward, I think it's very clear that we all, this word I think you're going to hear a lot if you haven't already. This is genuinely a pivotal point for the world, for the business and the brands. Never before, you know, even people are going back to 1918 and the Spanish flu, has an event hit so all of us at the same time and impacted. You know, those of us who remember the 9/11, the 2008 recession, even the Icelandic volcano, while they did have an impact on certain aspects, whether it was travel, etc., to have everybody impacted in such detail and to such a magnitude is unprecedented. So that means that a lot of the old rules of marketing and communication have shifted and changed, and this is what we are seeing. So I think, but what does this pivot actually mean in terms of, you know, where are we? This is a global event, it's a societal event. So many businesses are already doing so much, and I think this is one of the things, speed has been in this. I think all of us can name and cite brands that have stepped up to the plate and those that maybe have been laggards in this. But expectations are high, and they're going to get even higher because the conversation about return to work, return to normal, whatever that is going to be, people are going to be demanding more and more from their governments and their brands to lead them through this. But I think one of the areas that has really come out of it is actually humanity, is that, you know, people are expecting more empathy to really be able to communicate in a way that resonates with the situation that people are facing them in. So what does that mean? How do we actually understand this pivot and what it means for us? Sorry, Ishtar, would you mind moving on for us? Sorry. I think fundamentally we've got to bear in mind is that the world suddenly feels very fragile. Headlines that we have never expected to see before are now commonplace. You know, the army is out organising food deliveries. We have seen that food shortages, you know, all of us are probably now take for granted that, you know, you'll probably have to queue to go and buy your basic necessities. British Airways yesterday announced 12,000 job losses. You know, these are major numbers, and I mean, I think we should all take the time to pause to reflect, is that, you know, we are looking at 26,000 deaths. You know, this is a huge number. The impact on so many of us who are touched by this, there is no escaping from it. So the world does feel fragile. And so therefore, moving on, brands, they're looking for us to all to project this clarity, continuity and fairness. And I mean, some good examples of this, you know, Coca-Cola, you know, very quickly they moved their above the line spending to look at clear, simple public health messages, you know, using that money they have. The fact that our supermarkets have changed their opening hours to look after key workers. Brands like Costa, who have guaranteed pay to their workers for at least 8 weeks. You know, these are big, you know, there was a cost implication for all of these brands doing this, but they realized that by doing this, it was the way to sort of can maintain that trust and maintain, you know, be seen to be doing the right thing amongst their customers. But equally, amongst all of this, as communicators, we can ask you to move on, Ishtar, they want to hear from who can foster connections and belonging. I mean, all of us here on Zoom, I mean, you know, a couple of months ago, probably Zoom's figures, they were very low. They've just exponentially grown. The world of Teams, you know, this is commonplace. Us doing this is all normal. Brands like Netflix introducing Netflix Party. You can imagine, I mean, those of us on here who work for brands, who have clients, you know how long normally it takes to bring things to market, and suddenly new products and services that have reacted to the situation we're in are coming on market on a daily basis and will continue to do so. So speed and agility and reading the room literally are absolutely crucial. And that brings me on to my next point, which is all about information. Looking at our recent trust barometer, news consumption has absolutely gone through the roof. People at least once a day, 7 out of 10, 70% of people are listening to news. This, if you look at our previous trust barometers, that was down in the 40, 50 figures, 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10. News consumption is absolutely through. If you look at when Boris Johnson announced the lockdown on 23rd of March, 80% share of viewership. That is unheard of for UK measurements. And you look at CNN, Bloomberg, New Scientist, Wired. The fact is that Lad Bible and HuffPost are, you know, key contributors to the UK Prime Minister's press conferences. It just shows how it's changed. In China, Alibaba have launched a mini app, a source of up-to-date and rumour debunking. You know, these are new forms of technology that have been brought to market incredibly quickly to feed this desire for news and hunger, but they want authoritarian of it. So that's the situation. What does it actually mean if you are a brand? You have got a new permission, and I think this is one of the fundamental things of this, is that this is an opportunity to really look at what your brand positioning is and how you communicate with your key stakeholders. From that could be your customers, your suppliers, your staff, your regulators. There is a new normal is out there, and that includes all of it. So this new permission is really important, and people want to hear the people that can do that. And in this case, you know, allay their concerns and really give them some clarity of what's happening. I've spent sort of 20 years working in issues and crisis, and the phrase you deal a lot with is the concept of brands being tone deaf. Never has this phrase been more apt, but in a more positive way, is reading the room. All brands in terms of this have really got to look at their marketing communications and really understand, how is this going to land? How is this going to portray us? And I don't think there's been enough effort in the past to do that, but absolutely reading the room is going to be crucial. Complicated messages are not landing at the moment. You have to, this communication that's clear with intent and purpose, simplicity. I think we're all guilty, and I can put my hand up on this, is that you look at some of the campaigns that brands run, they've been particularly abstract. You know, the disconnect between actually what the product of that brand is marketing and actually how it's been marketed have got so far removed. Those days are over. there's got to be a clear link between what you are marketing and what you are saying to actually what is the reality of the situation. And if you have got facts, you need to amplify them and look at how you do those through your authoritative sources. Partnerships with, you know, we have with WHO, with whoever it is you are working with, who can you bring to add authority, because there is this hunger for factual news and information. So this is where we all stand. This is the context, which I actually think is very exciting, because it does, some of the old rules have now been ripped up and we need to work in a different way. So what can we expect from brands moving forward, or more importantly, what do our customers and our brands think for this? So as I mentioned, yeah, you can move on. We Edelman have we conducted very recently at the end of March. We're about to do a new cut of this online survey, 12 markets, spoke to about 12,000 people. I'm just going to run you through a top line, some of these findings. I think they help inform this whole idea of where we should be looking at marketing moving forward. So, if I may, move it on. Firstly, and I think this is really interesting, and this is why I'm leading with this, 62% of the people that we spoke to are absolutely adamant that brands are going to play a crucial role in this stage. You know, brands have been cited that they are going to be front and center and dealing with this pandemic. Now, whether that's putting your advertising spend into public information, whether it's how you look after your staff and your customers and your suppliers. And also, fundamentally, 55% of people, now statistically you could argue that's half, but that's still a high number actually, that brands have responded more quickly. And I think if you look at when we entered this pandemic, there was more decisive action from companies than there was the government. And I think the UK government came under criticism for this, for not acting quickly enough, when brands were already closing down offices, getting people to work from home, etc. And I think that we're going to see more of that. But on the flip side of this, is as we move down, is that already, and I think China is very important on this. I have convinced other people to stop using a brand that was not acting appropriately. I mean, that's worth just contemplating that. This is not just me as an individual saying, I am not going to shop here, I am not going to use that product, etc. This is like 30%, a third of people have been able to convince someone else not to do the same as well. And the reason why I mentioned China is that obviously China is further ahead in the cycle of this. So the reason why that is statistically quite interesting is that I was on a call with my colleagues in Beijing today, and we are opening offices as other brands and other companies are in China. So they are further ahead than this. And this is the legacy of that. I mean, look at that figure, that is so high. 76% of Chinese consumers being able to influence someone else to punish a brand. And I think we can safely say that what we see in China is going to be replicated over here when it reaches us here in the UK or in Europe. So what can we learn from this? Fundamentally, it is all about focusing on solutions, not selling. This is what people want to hear. How are you solving this problem that we are all facing now? We know that you have a product for sale. We know what its benefits are, but actually, what solution is that going to bring to me in terms of me as an individual making my way through this situation? So there's a couple of areas that I think brands can help build this narrative up. I ask just to scroll down, please. So I think, and I mean, all of us on this call, I think without, the majority of us are going to be employees. And ultimately, people are looking to actually, their organizations to actually protect their employees by looking at their well-being. And I think we've seen some great movement from a lot of brands in terms of really taking the mental health of their employees really seriously, but also the financial security of their employees and their suppliers. And I think the fundamental part of this is that, and I think this is learned from the last recession, is that the government has said this as well, is that individuals want everybody to suffer the pain. No, sorry, I should rephrase that. They don't want them to suffer, but the pain that we are all going to face should be equally spread. And organisations should be prepared to take a hit financially if it means helping protecting their employees and their staff. And this is resolute across all of the markets that we looked at. 90% is absolutely crucial to do this. So I think if you are looking at campaigns for clients, I think the first question, and we are asking, you should be asking, is actually, How are they looking after their staff? How are they treating their staff in this period? Because you can have the best marketing campaign to go out to your external audiences. If your staff are not being well treated, that is going to completely undermine where you're going to be. So looking at staff is important. Moving forward, I've already mentioned this, but it's really important. Looking producing products that can actually help. That's how they're going to do, brands are going to do this. You know, what are you bringing to market? What are you focusing on that is actually going to help? If you've got a product portfolio, where are your products that are actually going to help people deal with this situation, either to make, you know, their mental health, to make their life easier, to help them with their sanitation needs, whatever it is, sanitary needs, etc. You need that. So, yeah, 89% of people are looking at you to shift your products that help meet these challenges. Offering lower price products to health workers. And equally, this is really interesting. And I know this, you know, I work in an agency, you know, we're all sitting on product launches that were due to go live over the summer, new campaigns that we're going to bring to market. 54% of people said that they weren't going to pay any attention to joining new products. I've just spoken to some contacts of mine in the automotive industry, and you know, they are launching new cars. They are getting they're getting coverage in some publications. They are getting absolutely no online traffic to their website to look at new products in this space. Now, arguably, you can say that the automotive industry is like a discretionary purchase, but it's completely stopped. So actually looking at products and marketing activities you've got coming up, are they relevant to what people want to hear in this market? I think the next slide is really interesting. Partner with government. Is that if you want to earn your trust of your consumers, you've got to be seen to be working with government and relief agencies. You need to be seen to be working hand in hand. And we've seen that already from supermarkets opening early, from Burberry supplying PPE equipment to Barber, to health workers. This is expected. This in a way is now what we would call table stakes. It doesn't actually, your consumers are expecting you to do this. But fundamentally as well, you've got to be there as a safety net. Whether that's from when you're furloughing staff and you know you're topping up the 80% with 20% of people's wages to make sure that they don't financially harm. All of these conversations are now absolutely front and center of mind, and this is how consumers are judging brands at the moment. This is what they are looking for. To fill in these gaps is absolutely crucial. To move on, and this is probably fundamental to all of us on this call, serve as an information source. You need to be a reliable source. I know we've got obviously colleagues on here from the health industry. I know from my experience, you know, you have great in-house scientists, you have experts who have been working in this field for many years. I believe that for the health industry, there is going to be a major focus on you as the world of vaccines for COVID becomes more and more forefront in people's minds. You know, people are used to hearing that vaccines take potentially decades to bring to market, and now they're going to potentially bring a market into vaccine to market into 18 months, 2 years. The pressure on the pharmaceutical industry and the health industry to really reassure customers and consumers that these vaccines are safe, they've been tried and tested, etc., is going to be absolutely key. And you have got a license to operate on here because you are going to be seen as a reliable news source because you are the experts in this field. So putting forward the right people you have internally to really explain your situation is going to be absolutely key. And moving on to the next slide. Use your brand to educate. Be an educator. Normally, you know, I said that the world has been turned upside down. Normally, one of the golden rules of a crisis is never try and educate people during a crisis. This is one of these rules that's been thrown out of the, you know, absolutely thrown out the window during this situation. Absolutely, be an educator. Take time to explain the efficacy, the process that you've been through in bringing vaccines or products to market, because that is what people want to hear. Offer instructional information, you know, whether it's from hand cleaning. I have a client that produces a bleach-based disinfectant, and I had a very busy week last week dealing with trying to just remind people that maybe the President of the United States isn't correct. We suggest using it to curate. But we had to put out very clear, very calm material just to make sure that people understood that it was educating people, because that's the role that we had to play. And equally, brands are seen fundamentally, on the next slide, are critical to winning the fight against the pandemic. 83% of people agree that brands have got a role to play in connecting people and helping them stay emotionally close. This is on all of us to see how can we help our brands play that role. Obviously, got Howard on here from Google to talk later. Social media channels have been key on that. You know, the use of TikTok, how Twitter and Facebook and social and platforms like Zoom have brought people close together. Continuing to do that and using any resources that you've got. So my final part of this, just to go through this, is actually, what does this all mean? How can we, all this data, what can we actually do to communicate and actually win this over? So I'm just going to run through just some, hopefully some guidelines that may just help you form that messaging. If this is the strategy, what do our tactics and messaging look like? So moving on, if I may. Communicate how you're helping. We've all been told that, and they're right in employee engagement terms, over communicate, even though we've probably all got a little bit fed up with the team, you know, the Zoom calls that are happening on a daily basis. But in terms of your consumers, keep your public fully informed of what you're doing. How are you supporting and protecting employees and customers? We all actually have more time now to digest news. We're at home, we have our laptops, we're looking more closely probably at our Twitter feeds, we're looking at information being shared on our WhatsApp groups. So really making sure you're keeping people updated with what you're doing, because people are demanding it now. It's not a nice to have, they're expecting you to do it. And also any changes your brand is making, shifting manufacturing facilities. You know, Ineos, you know, they came out incredibly quickly and said, we've set up a whole new plant to make hand sanitizer. You know, a chemical company talking about its production techniques does not normally warrant front page news, but that is a lead story. So really get that communication front and center. Moving on, be reassuring, you know, how you've made progress, be honest. People want to hear about how they're doing, but how they're actually making progress. You'll see this globally, you know, 65% of people, they want to hear about how brands have shifted and said that we said we were going to do X, we've now achieved X, and now we're looking to achieve Y. Keeping those messages flowing and regular are really important. Fundamentally, on the next slide, show that you care. Absolutely, it goes back to what I said, reading the room. Public statements that are expressing empathy and support that are most affected by the pandemic. You know, again, someone who works in corporate crisis and has deals with crisis, you know, corporate tones that are cold and unfeeling, show genuine passion and empathy for the situation that people are facing at the moment. Show that you care. Let emotion come into your corporate statements. Show that you are human, because this is what people are looking at for the moment. They're looking for reassurance. They're looking for brands that speak in a human voice to make sure that you're being that. But also focus on solutions. Advertising products and services that are going to help people deal with the pandemic related life challenges. You know, if you've got a service that you think is going to help people, whether it's looking after children at home easier, new products that are going to help sanitize as we move forward, whatever it is, just make sure you're communicating solutions. And also only talk about products in a way that shows they're aware of the crisis. Sadly, I've had to review some campaigns recently that are completely tone deaf to the fact is, you know, I had one campaign recently that was showing people, it was meant to show how powerful an individual was in a meeting room. The meeting room had 12 people sitting around a boardroom table. That is not the world that people are used to at the moment. It's not aspirational, it just jars, because 12 people sitting in the room together at the moment just feels alien. Don't display those images. Think very carefully of the image that you're portraying and be relevant to the situation. Fundamentally as well, I'm just going to talk about who you should trust. Doctors and health authorities, credible spokespeople. As I said earlier, those of you that work for health brands or have access to health brands, you know, you have these people on board, you have technical experts. Bring them on board. Brand's technical expert is above the brand CEO. This is not the time for the CEO to come out and posture. This is time for the person who really does understand the situation and can talk technically to come out and put them forward. So use the right spokespeople for your business. just on that, yeah, sorry, my apologies. Be wary, sorry, be cautious with humour and escapism. This is not the time for it. I said, sadly in the UK we've had 26,000 deaths. This is not the time to make light of this and to bring humour into it. You really need, I mean, a good example of that is the Budweiser brought back their WhatsApp campaign. But that was to check on individuals, check on your friends, make sure they're okay, etc. So be careful with humorism and escapism, because it just doesn't show, as I said, showing people in a meeting, 12 people in a meeting room is not going to land you friends at the moment. Moving on, I'm conscious of, sorry, Ishtar. Traditional media has absolutely come to the forefront of this. Your emphasis, I mean, I read today that the British government is going to spend an extra £35 million with local newspapers and local media to communicate public information messages. Do the same. How do you reach your consumers through those trusted sources? So TV and radio, newspaper, 45%. That's still where people want to hear, and that's across the world there. So it's very important. But again, in the UK, you'll notice that email is still key. The brand's website, again, I personally get frustrated that people spend a fortune building up their websites, and then at times like this, they don't use them. If you've got new information, put it up on your website, put it front and center, keep people updated, drive people for your social channels, use your own assets. But equally, for those of us who obviously come from a PR background, this is a PRCA event. On the next slide, earned media is absolutely crucial. It's believed most readily. You'll see there, 18% of people, if I see it there, I'll automatically assume it. If I see it once or twice, it goes up to 46. If you can get a story in the national media that is repeated 2 times, you've got 64% believability on it. That is really important to make sure that you do it. And people will, on the bottom line, I will never believe it's true if it's only the one place I see it. It's only 8 in the national media. I think this really does go to show how important this is. And again, local media has absolutely shut up. So just think about where you can place your earned media story. So allow me to sum up at the end. I'm just going to repeat a slide. Sorry, Ishtar. Let me think fundamentally on all of this. If I could just bring this all to life, there is 4 key areas I think are just worth remembering. Be conscious of your new permission space. Challenge the norms. You have got a new license to operate. Embrace that. Take that forward, because if you're not, your competitors will. Read the room. Don't be tone deaf. Make sure you're understanding the situation that your consumers are in, and make sure that you are reflective of that, as some of the data has shown. Make sure your communication is unambiguous. Make sure it's clear. Make sure it's got a good intention and it has got a purpose. If you're going to say something, only speak if you're going to say something important. It's going to make a difference. Be really focused on that. Superfluous, ambiguous messaging is not going to land well at the moment. And really focus on the facts. You brands have got an opportunity to be a trusted source of information. So make sure you amplify that. And in particular, you amplify that by using the right spokespeople and through the right media to deliver that. So in summary on that, that's where I believe we stand at the moment. I'm now going to hand over to Harold, who's going to bring this to life with sort of backing this up with some very interesting data and analytics on where we are in this situation. So thank you for your time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Duncan. I'm just going to share my screen now. And if you can give me a thumbs up when you can see it, that'd be great. How are we doing there? Can we see it?
Yep, we're good.
Perfect. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you, Duncan. That was brilliant. I'm tempted to leave it there, frankly. So many insights shared. 3 things I loved in particular were the 62% of people agreeing that brands have to play a critical role. That's huge to me. The speed piece, particularly as marketers who tend to want things to be perfect. And then the idiom, the reading the room, which I couldn't agree more right now. It's such an exciting time to be a marketer, to be in comms, because there are opportunities to act quickly and effectively and not compromise on quality. So quick hello from me. My name is Harold, and I have been in marketing for about 6 years. I began my career as a failed entrepreneur in the advertising space, I then went on to lead Tinder's UK growth marketing for a couple of years. I heard their usage is up at the moment, and now I work for Google since 2016. I lead a team supporting health and nutrition brands. And to really explain my interest in this space, I'd love to introduce you guys to my father, whose image is not coming up. That's a shame. My dad's name's Steve, and he is a carer of 10 years. He left a career in sales for 30 years and became a carer. And through anecdotes with him, I've grown to realise the importance of the health space and the power, I suppose, of technology to improve people's lives and help brands as well as organisations as well as charities to deliver more value to these people. Cool. And so I suppose I'm here to build on some of what Duncan shared and share a few trends from a consumer point of view that hopefully you'll find useful to accompany your upcoming campaigns and efforts. So diving straight in, we're actually going to borrow a framework from Google's Think with Google Insights team, just to split out the chronology of what it means to deep dive on a consumer trend and how people's online habits change. So the immediacy piece, the new day-to-day that's emerging that many of you will have observed, and finally emerging behaviours that have come from this. So having a think about things that might actually stick as a result of COVID. And like the trust barometer, which has been incredibly insightful, we're going to use our Google Trends as our data signal, which we really invite you to check out yourself. Prior to joining Google, I didn't realize that it was so publicly available, I'm ashamed to say, although it was many moons ago. And it has only evolved in terms of the reach and the insights that you can get from Google Trends. So I'm going to start with a timeline of coronavirus according to Google search, and specifically since January, and specifically around the search term coronavirus and closely related terms, just to set the scene. And as we can see here, coronavirus has outstripped some age-old illnesses that are equally, let's say popular on Google search. To explain the actual gulf, the y-axis here is a popularity index of the term. So we take the number of searches, the given search, and we divide it by the number of searches to get a popularity. And the key takeaway here, I hope we agree, is the peak in mid-March, and also the relative decline up to Sunday, which is when I pulled this. And I look forward to hearing from everyone here as to some of the factors behind this, I suppose, decline, although still very, very strong compared to cold flu analogy. Okay, how has COVID-19 affected health as a category according to Google search? To, I suppose, frame this to give some perspective, let's have a look at three categories that you may expect to be growing as a result of the stay-at-home policy. So home and garden for the enthusiasts looking to improve their gaff. Mobile apps to combat this boredom we're all facing, of course. And then lastly, the cooking. Finally, we back ourselves as good chefs now that we have the time, although the meals I've produced say otherwise. Now let's compare three subcategories within health just to create some perspective. My goodness, 800% versus quite large categories is an indication that this is absolutely front of mind and is reflected in the way we search. Of course, they are slightly newer categories, smaller categories. So to grow home and garden by, let's say, 100% year on year would be very difficult as a long-standing category. Nonetheless, a bit of perspective I hope there is useful. And this is year on year growth, year to date. So since January again. That's great, but what's happening in the overall health space? So if we take the category, and there are hundreds of subcategories, from the demand for dentistry to health insurance to vitamins to health clinics, we look at the overall growth and it's double-digit growth year on year, which you might be thinking, oh, that doesn't seem like a huge amount. But just for some perspective, I suppose the Google search engine's been around for over 20 years now, and so to still see double-digit growth is an indication that something's happening in the space, and it'd be good to deep dive. So let's do that before we dive into the actual consumer habits. Firstly, a few categories growing above, or well above, the overall health average. Here we have some chronic diseases. We also have weight loss, which I think is quite interesting, a category home to people searching for different diets, calorie restriction, and the such. It's a subcategory that peaks Monday to Wednesday, fun fact, and usually peaks annually in terms of months in January, as you might expect. But we're seeing that in April, it's comfortably above the average for overall health. And that's maybe something, again, I'd love to unpack with yourselves after this, any insights into what could be contributing to this. If we jump to some subcategories within overall health that are similar to the overall rate, we see pharmacies, hospital and health clinics, kind of makes sense, linked to an increase in search demand, of course. And then we also see the likes of high cholesterol, which is closely associated to heart disease, our #1 killer of humans, according to the World Health Organization. So again, understandable that that remains above the average for the category. Now let's look to what's slightly below the average, and really important to highlight that this does not mean it's declining, it just means it's below the average in the health space. And here we have again some chronic diseases as well as superfood supplements, which perhaps makes more sense given that we might be reprioritizing our health towards more immediate focal points. Again, really, really welcome comments on this and insights based on your clientele or your direct business or organization. Finally, growing a fair bit below the average, again, still growing. This isn't to say they're subcategories in decline, is quitting smoking, is arthritis, is eczema. I won't speak out of turn in terms of hypothesizing why these are below. Again, would love the insight from the group after this. A quick pivot before we dive into the consumer insights, just to finish, is the, I suppose, adoption of online health services via apps, which has rapidly accelerated in recent months. Although we should also factor in seasonality, I suppose, in here. And we've taken a few wider markets alongside the trust barometer, which was really insightful. Okie doke. A reminder of what we're going to be focusing on as our data point for the consumers again. Every single week, essentially, for the last few months, we've been plowing through search trends, understanding how consumers are changing their habits, because fundamentally, we want to help marketers like yourself understand what people value right now and how to service them, serve them and solve their problems. And if there is a commercial gain alongside this, that is for the company to assess. And to really zoom in on the 3 topics we're going to focus on: the new day-to-day, the immediacy, and the emerging behaviors, as mentioned earlier. So I want to give one example of an immediate need and maybe touch on some brands that are delivering interesting responses and having some success. And I suppose the really, really key thing here, as really focused on by Duncan, is this idea of speed. And there is nowhere more, I suppose, immediate than when people turn to Google search. So let's take an obvious one. Let's take hand sanitizer. So as the traditional media sources shared information about the importance of washing our hands, as mentioned by Duncan, the traditional media sources appear to be highly trusted. People flocked online to understand, what kind of hand sanitizer do I have to buy? What's the purpose? How do I even wash my hands? I believe a lot of people have been revisiting. And the suggestion for the brand here, based on the insight, because we see how immediate that peak was and how quickly it dropped, is let's earn people's trust perhaps by quickly helping them to educate themselves. Here we have Walgreens as an example. So I mentioned also this idea of collaboration across a team. This isn't just comms and marketing. We have the video and creative team. We also have the UX and web dev team who've helped to reconfigure their mobile facing site to make sure there's a blended image of what the response is from Walgreens. And then for our comms and marketing people, yes, it wouldn't be a Google presentation without mentioning the immediacy of Google search and in this case, ads. I've seen a lot of our partners collaborating between PR and marketing in a new way, because there is an opportunity to leverage the PR's team's ability to write copy in an empathetic way, in a clear, concise way, versus maybe only a month ago, an approach to copy that would imply kind of call to action and real desire to drive the purchase versus maybe solve the problem, which I think is worth kind of sitting on. And if you're not already close to the digital marketing team, I'd invite you all to maybe have that conversation. Likewise, for companies running dynamic search advertising, the conversation you might want to have as a PR professional would be actually with the UX team and the web dev team who are optimizing landing pages, and change the wording on the landing pages, because that's what's going to trigger a search. And happy to follow up on that separately if anyone has any questions on how that works. The question I want to leave this section on, I suppose, is will the same apply with face masks? And is your organization, your brand, in a position to help to serve in this instance, not just by making and selling face masks, but really educating on their potential importance? And also the question becomes, how immediate will this drop be? Will it be as quick as hand washing? And if not, perhaps there's a strategy to be built around it long term. Cool. So having covered the example and of immediate needs, let's look into the new day to day. And of course, these are new habits we would have all observed. And the example we're going to use is hopefully not going to be too foreign to all of you. Enter stage left, the home workout, which is officially more popular than Justin Bieber, I'm afraid to report. And specifically for the UK example, Joe Wicks, who put up some incredible numbers in March. I want to take you back to March 23rd. It's a Monday, and Joe posts his first P lesson with Joe. He garners twice the number of views that Justin Bieber had on his last video, despite Bieber having Bieber. Justin Bieber having 3 weeks head start. And to add to this, Justin Bieber has 53 million subscribers to Joe Wicks' 1.7, probably much higher now. The point, I hope, is self-explanatory. There is a real opportunity to be there in the new daily habit and not just respond one-off, but actually potentially build a strategy around that. One thing I did state, however, in the slide before this is this idea of time. Is this a new day-to-day? But let's have a look. So let's go across Europe, a little bit like the trust barometer. In Spain, suddenly the home workout has been certainly popularized based on the zero on the timeline prior to early March. In the UK, the buying of sports equipment for home workouts is incredible. I was set back 3 figures for some dumbbells myself, and I just think it's a reflection of people committing maybe to a new daily habit because they know how long this is going to be before gyms reopen. And I want to actually celebrate some brands doing some interesting things here. Firstly, Macmillan, a quick, a smart, a reactive campaign. Although I'm sure, I don't know, but there might have been a lot of planning gone into it prior. Basically encouraging, supporting people to do their home workouts and, of course, raise money for charities that need it. This might include, in this case, the 2.6 challenge. I love the idea of 26 sofa dips or a 2.6 minute plank or 26 hula hoop jumps. It makes it so accessible, it makes it fun, and it doesn't make it as daunting. Likewise, Babylon, also in the health space, just giving a gentle reminder to consider exercise and be there on the way with the customers, with the care users that they serve. On a more commercial note, I do want to touch on an interesting case study that has benefited commercially, I'm sure, in an impressive way. So the image to the left here is an Instagram post about a giveaway, a home equipment giveaway, having obviously seen the trend. This post garnered, in fact, we'll do it backwards. The post before this was of world heavyweight boxing champion Anthony Joshua, and it garnered 3,000 likes. Likes aren't necessarily the entire currency, but they're certainly a reflection of engagement, and there's a conversion rate off of that engagement. This post garnered 130,000 likes. I don't know how much more or less it cost to assemble this, essentially the equipment and the giveaway, but it was an example of a brand really jumping on something that people really want and arguably need if they're a health enthusiast living at home. Alongside this, the brand also offered home workouts for the first time in video form to really help people get through this. So kudos to the acknowledgement of new trends and reacting quickly to it. And now for the world's worst pun. There's a plot twist here. We've talked about this new day today, this workout trend. But if we jump to South Africa, people aren't quite as bothered about it there. I don't know why that is. Perhaps there's the policy implications when the lockdown happened, but this is an assumption potentially that brands can make and fall short with. Likewise, let's go to Germany. Germany, who, from what I've read, are easing some of the lockdown restrictions and some of these self-isolation measures, have returned, you could argue, to pre-COVID interest levels rather for home workouts. And I checked with some German friends that this is actually a commonly searched for word, workout für zu Hause. So I suppose the takeaway here, just as a suggestion, whilst of course looking for new daily trends and not being too apprehensive about embracing them and thinking about them in a strategy for comms or marketing, we invite you to just regularly revisit trends before committing to a large strategy, whether that be in terms of investment or time, because they move fast and they vary across markets. Again, fairly clear as a suggestion, but food for thought, I hope. Great. And then finally, I suppose we want to touch on these emerging behaviours, which I suppose is why we're all here. We're here to predict the markets, predict the future, and I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to be sticking my neck out here. But I will touch on a few things that could be interesting. And here's the disclaimer. What we will do is compare with last year to give a real strong indication of how much change has happened, and really look at this through the lens of firstly, marketing and comms people, but then also organizations and brands within the health space, the health sector specifically. So, of course, our health workers, our heroes, are front of mind. But my goodness, they're more or less all we think about. You could contest right now, and rightly so. Phenomenal work they're doing. The question, I suppose, turns to what brands are doing to acknowledge this. I want to call out a couple of brands in the health space that have done well. One technically is a direct-to-consumer product on the right, an American brand, and the left, of course, is Headspace, who have grown tremendously, and it's a touch of class to be able to offer such a valuable service to health workers, both in the US and the UK. I don't know how official the partnership has been with the NHS, but certainly they've made it clear that you're able to access their paid version for free. Speaking of healthcare workers on our phones, and sorry, just to clarify, the takeaway here, I suppose we're asking, is how long is this going to continue as an emerging trend in comms and marketing? Have we gone past the days of aspirational marketing in some sectors, and are we going to stay really closely tied to the people that matter in society and celebrating them? Will the next group of people we celebrate be, and we've seen it already, warehouse workers, people in high-risk jobs, and how far will this stretch? And will we hopefully carry on celebrating this, hopefully when this terrible pandemic slows down? And again, I'd love to hear from the group in that instance. So the other piece on emerging behaviours is another health worker related topic, I suppose, and that's one I'm really interested in personally. And this is the telehealth trend. And I'd love to ask the question to the group: is it finally going mainstream? And why? And a little bit of context around why it's expanding so heavily, and this is for the US specifically, where there appears to be an enormous need. A piece of legislation was put in place in March to help the US cope with the crisis better, and I suppose there was a loosening of the regulations around how telehealth providers were able to interact with their potential users. So an ability to now use Zoom, to now use Skype, to now use Google Hangouts. And there is also a piece of legislation moving forward to allow, I believe, health organisations to actually claim revenue back from Medicare for the service they deliver. And of course, this is somewhat of a no-brainer for keeping people safe, particularly if they have symptoms, but it's also really forcing the digitization of the initial consultation with a health professional and demystifying it and making it realize that it's more doable than we perhaps think. And a few examples of brands across the world coming to the fore. On the left, we have an Italian chatbot brand, PlushCare, a US brand in the middle, and then Bioformis, or Formi, that are based in Singapore. So I don't know whether this is interesting for any of you working in the PR space looking to maybe expand your network and perhaps your clients, but certainly I think we're going to see a lot of brands coming out of the background, because it's incredibly valuable service. And then I suppose just a message to again check out Google Trends. We can explore the geography of this, and perhaps the emerging trend won't be nationwide in places like the US, but certainly in more rural states where there is a greater difficulty to access healthcare from sparsely populated towns. So it might not be as binary as an emerging trend across the board. Certainly one I look forward to following with great intent. The key takeaway for the emerging trend for brands in this space, I suppose, is there an opportunity to leverage tech? And Google quite recently actually allowed the integration of, if you look down the bottom here, of the virtual visit into your Google page, which is pretty exciting, and there's other brands doing it likewise. I would lean into any cloud technology that's available and see how it can be leveraged right now, because there is an appetite, I suppose, for people to try out previously unattempted or strangely viewed medical ways of operating. A bit of a mouthful. So I suppose a reminder, just to summarize this, under immediate needs, to echo what Duncan said, make it easy, be really clear with your message, and help. Be empathetic, help, and you will benefit. And as an organization, as a brand, or hopefully, and do your bit. That's expected of you, whether you benefit or not. And then the new day-to-day, there are several trends. Let's stay on top of them. They're interesting, but make sure we just constantly revisit them across markets and across categories. And then emerging behaviors, I think it's too early to tell. It would be to undermine the value of trends, maybe to make a call, but let's watch this space and let's continue, I suppose, sharing ideas and hopefully help it. A few resources I've just posted here, and I'd be glad to follow up afterwards if anyone would like to connect on LinkedIn. Google Trends, COVID-19 trends, and also some upcoming webinars to assist businesses from everything in terms of UX to how they structure their accounts and marketing campaigns. And that's it from me. Thank you so much, and looking forward to discussing and learning from all of you in the next few minutes.
Great, thank you, Harold. And thank you, Duncan. Obviously, some really great insights there. I think we're going to go ahead and start with some of the questions, and I've got a few here to kind of kick it off. But I just wanted to call out that we do have the chat function open, so if anyone in the audience has questions for our speakers, please just drop them there, or you can send it to me privately if you feel that's better, and I can ask them as we go along. But I might just kick it off with one for Duncan first, if that works. You kind of touched on the importance of solutions not selling, and so I wanted to see what your take is on how that connects to the trend that we saw before COVID-19 around the rise of kind of purpose-driven business, and how tied do you think those things are, and how important do you think that's going to be moving forward?
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting point. I think I would look at it as an evolution of that trend for purpose-driven marketing, but I think the purpose has now actually got a clear definition. I think there is a desire and need, which is sort of, in a way, sort of the searches that Harold has talked about and the trends that he's seeing, and what we've found in our survey as well, is that if you're going to talk about purpose, it's got to be linked to the situation that your consumers are facing now. So how are you going to improve the environment? But I mean that in its purest sense. And I think the way I'd sum it up is that purpose is actually, I would argue, is going to be reclaimed from its original meaning. You know, what is the purpose of your organization? If you say your purpose is to enhance people's lives, how are you actually going to enhance people's lives? Are you going to make more products available to them? Are you going to help the most needy in society? I think really having a much clearer definition of what your purpose is and how it's going to really really impact the consumers or wider society is what the definition of it's going to be. So to answer your question is yes, people are going to want solutions and they can be linked to your purpose. But I think having great stated goals saying, you know, our 2025 vision for the organization is X, is just not going to land. What people are going to want to know is that what is your vision for 2020 and what is your purpose for 2020 to help society and the environment in its truest sense move through this issue.
Great. Harold, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Otherwise, I can ask the next question.
No, well said, Duncan. Yeah, go for it as well.
Great. I think this might be for both of you, really. But, you know, I think with everyone putting out so much COVID-19 related content, and we know that, you know, we really need to be, everything that we are putting out as communicators needs to make reference to this new normal or the current situation. But, you know, do you think that, or, you know, based on the search trends that you're seeing, are we experiencing any sort of COVID-19 information fatigue yet? Or do you think that we might see that kind of moving forward?
The first thing that sprung to mind there was the reference to Brexit, for example, the Brexit fatigue. I think a lot of the analysis we're trying to do internally is comparing to similar, not similar, but other high focus events. I think it's too early to tell. Is a bit of a politician's answer, but I certainly think the way we go about referencing it, there could be some fatigue associated. I suppose ideas will get more and more creative. It will be clearer and clearer that more thoughts going into campaigns related to it and comms into it, and that might remove some of the sincerity of the campaign, the comms, which in turn may drive fatigue. I don't know if you want to build on that, Duncan.
Yeah, I don't think we are going to see fatigue of brands communicating messaging or actions that reflect the needs that we've talked about. If you are providing a service and you are keeping people regularly updated, people are not going to get fatigued from that. We are consuming more. We are all living in isolated bubbles, cut off from our normal sources of interaction with people. So we are going to be listening and looking for those messages. And I think that we are going to see the growth of sort of super brands in terms of those brands that have really stepped up and, you know, have communicated and have shown progress and development in how they have helped their environment, their stakeholders move through this situation. So I think we will get fatigue. I think from an above the line advertising point of view, I think we will get fatigue of montage shots of people, you know, real people at home entertaining themselves and doing individual things. I think, you know, the Zoom screen advertising images will start to wear thin because that will be too reflective of what people have been enjoying on a day-to-day basis. But if you've got a brand that is communicating a breakthrough, a new initiative, a new way that they are helping key workers or their own staff, that is always going to land well with your audience.
Great. We've got a question here. Basically, someone's asking, in some of our relations with health journalists, the feedback is that they are interested in looking at stories that aren't necessarily COVID related, but obviously given the current environment, they can't turn it you know, into coverage. Like, I guess, do you have any tips for, as you say, not being tone deaf, but also, you know, seeing if we can get some of those things over the line?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm managing a number of things outside of COVID at the moment, and, you know, people's lives are still continuing. I think it all comes down to reading the room. Again, you know, if what you want to communicate doesn't have to be always on the COVID-19, but it just needs to be reflective of how you literally pitch it in. And it's got to be relevant. You know, there is no point talking publicising a brand that is sort of, I don't know, advocating public gatherings, or the next time you're with people, you're travelling to places, or it's not going to be available or that easily to get available in shops. It's just not going to land well. But actually, if it is dealing with some of the wider issues that people are dealing with, I think the financial sector, for example, new products and services, new technology, the healthcare professionals, absolutely. People still have got ailments that need to be dealt with. You haven't been able to access dentists. I think one of the things I've seen a huge growth in is people looking at temporary filling kits. People are still having issues with their health that still need to go to, but we're seeing a drop off in people going to their doctors or hospitals because they're worried about contracting COVID. So I think if you have got a product or service that is going to help people even indirectly get through this situation, even if it's not COVID related, absolutely there is a market and a hunger to hear that information.
No, and I think on the point that you guys kind of both touched on the rise of telemedicine and telehealth, I think that's going to be super important, and I think it also ties into the what we talked about before this call around the pace of innovation, because I think it's a really interesting point for health clients right now, where especially for pharma, which I know a lot of people on this call will probably be working in or have clients in that sector, that actually trust in pharma is kind of at a high place right now, because they're looking to you and those brands and those companies for that type of information. So I guess it's how do they kind of capitalize on that forward motion and then that kind of the first upward swing that they've seen in a long time, and continue that as we kind of maybe settle in and go as back to what our new normal looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I never.
Go on,
sorry,
Duncan.
Harold.
No, go
What I
on.
was going to say is I think I said it, that we have pivoted to a new environment, and brands that are trusted are going to be able to move forward. And I think the fundamental part is that every brand has a legacy. And I have been advising some brands lately that are looking at their return to service offer, but they've not taken into account that actually they have got some legacy issues away, how they manage these issues in the first place, and that's going to contaminate what they do next. I mean, to be very honest, from a UK's point of view, we are all absolutely waiting to see what the impact is on Wetherspoons. I know that's not related to this healthcare industry, but here is a brand that you could argue did not handle ideally how we went into the COVID situation, but they are looking to reopen in June. What memories have people got? Will they just go back to the normal and they'll be there in Wetherspoons because what they offer is what they want, or actually will there be a legacy from it? And I think we're going to see that across a lot of brands. And I think there's going to be a couple of barometers that I think I know I am, but if I was a marketeer or a brand communicator, I would be watching those brands very, very closely to see how their new messaging lands in this new situation, and make sure that you're prepared accordingly.
Harold, I think you had something that you were going to add there as well.
I'm really happy with how Duncan rounded off that question.
Well, I also wanted to just quickly touch on one of your points, Harold, around the speed, because I think you kind of summed it up nicely. It's like we can definitely in PR and comms be perfectionists sometimes, and it's sometimes it's about the craft. We really want that piece of content or the video to be as perfect as possible and have just the right messaging. And so what would you suggest in terms of balancing getting things out at the right time? Because I guess as you flagged in your slide around the window of time for certain brands, and with the peak of interest, like it's not a big amount of time. So how can we kind of balance those competing interests from ourselves, but also sometimes from our clients, and wanting to make sure things are exactly perfect before they go out?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two parts to that. The digital marketer in me would say ideally you'd create a cost benefit analysis. You'd size the opportunity. So say you were in the hand sanitizer space, understand how large is the opportunity, and what would be the compromise of a 10% worse campaign for 30% more time in front of prospective customers. So It would depend, I suppose, but and also the verticals. So one thing I was researching ahead of this was, yeah, certainly what pharma brands are doing versus B2C versus charities, and I imagine there are a lot more restrictions in some verticals from a, I suppose, a legal point of view and a PR point of view that necessitate taking longer. So it'd be easy for me to say a consumer brand can just pop out a piece of content and benefit from it, but there is a sizing of the opportunities to be done, and also a sizing of the risk, which means it would differ across, I suppose.
And I guess the flip side of that is, what on that risk piece is, what opportunities are being lost, do you think, by brands who aren't able to pivot quickly and, to take advantage of those types of opportunities?
Yeah, I actually want to just celebrate a point Duncan made about this legacy idea. I think in the here and now, we won't know, but certainly as a user and the discussions we're having internally, to go on a website that is not acknowledging the issue feels a little bit off. I'm not saying it's bad, but it feels a little bit off. And a big part of what we've been doing with our partners in the early stages of COVID is actually just sharing UX best practices and some tangible ways of acknowledging in website communication the implications of this, whether it be an empathetic message or whether it be just an explanation of maybe a slower service or a change. So it remains to be seen, but certainly I feel that the new norm would be to acknowledge and to be really, really focusing on how do you want to be remembered when we look back in 6 months, in 9 months. Did you step up? Were you part of did you speak to the 62% of people who believe that brands have to play a critical role in this crisis?
Yeah, I think there's two good points in that around, looking for partners who you wouldn't necessarily be working day to day hand in hand with, or there's, either suppliers or different teams within your businesses, as you say, like the UX teams, and making sure that, you guys, everything that you're doing is dovetailing in the same way, and having that consciousness. Yeah, and I think as well it ties in with something that Duncan mentioned as well around how people are treating their employees during this time as well is all part of that legacy, and I think will be a huge part of how people look at businesses moving forward, and or companies that they want to work for moving forward as well. So I think that there's a relation. What we definitely what we've seen is over the last couple of months, the rise in our programs that have employee engagement components has definitely risen. So I think that seems to be an opportunity that's coming up more and more as well. We've got a question here. How long will people continue to cut brands some slack because of COVID-19 when it comes to quality and delivery of product or service? Should we assume that goodwill about extraordinary circumstances will disappear overnight?
Oh, absolutely. I would argue I don't think brands are getting any slack at the moment. I think we are customer service responsive. You only have to go on social media and looking at the brands, either Wi-Fi companies, telecoms companies, delivery companies. I'm not sure there ever has been actually much slack. If you have a service or product that you need to deliver and you're not delivering it, I think you will create this issue that won't go away. So yeah, I haven't, any of the clients I'm dealing with, and I'm dealing with some clients that have been massively impacted by this, and it's having a real impact on their service, but their customers are not, because they're under pressure themselves. I think this goes back to my opening point, is that nobody has been immune from this. If you look at supply chain, everybody in the supply chain has been impacted by this. Nobody is riding through this without an impact to them. So no, I think if anybody feels at the moment they're getting any slack, I think that will come back to bite them. Investing in customer service teams, making sure you're absolutely delivering, communicating honestly. If it's going to take you an extra 4 days to deliver a product, you are going to have to make some changes to pricing because your raw ingredients prices have escalated because of increased supply chain costs. Communicate and do it, and make sure that people know it. But no, I think that if there was a window of opportunity where your consumers were cutting slack, I think it was very small and has ended now.
Great.
And yeah, just maybe one small thing to build on that. There certainly has been a trend in terms of the partners we work with and what we've observed, a trend towards measuring one metric more than maybe before. typically maybe revenue, maybe new users would be the focus. There has been a renewed focus on the MP score, the client satisfaction score. So it is being measured from what we're observing a lot more rigorously, even though of course it's always front of mind. So if that says something about at least it being a focus, then worth knowing.
Totally. I think I agree. With Duncan's point around like brands not getting very much slack at all, because I think when this all happened and people were basically flooding the Ocado website and then freaking out when they had to shut it down. I think that's just a great example of that in practice. Another question around the fact that obviously people are clearly hungry for COVID-19 health and other tangential information, and they're spending so much more time, substantially more time looking at that information, reading it, not just from social media, but also from, more traditional local and kind of global media sources. But obviously there's also a high risk for false or misinformation to spread quickly. And we've seen this, before the COVID-19 epidemic, but obviously, huge implications here. I was just thinking of the example of Djokovic's wife, who recently got the false information kind of tag on Instagram for spreading, saying that like 5G kind of can cause different diseases, and being anti-vax. So what do you think the role of the person working in the health comms is in helping combat that kind of risk of misinformation?
That's a very good question. It's probably going to get me into trouble, actually, because I have quite a strong view on this, particularly when it comes to the health industry. And I do have a lot of health clients, so I say this based on my experience as well. I think I talked earlier about trust within the health industry. I think this is going to be one of the greatest opportunities for the health and pharmaceutical industry that probably the industry has ever seen, but it's also probably one of the most dangerous, because exactly that point on misinformation. There is a legacy issue within the health industry of transparency. It hasn't always covered itself in glory. And I think the messaging that the industry has been putting out, for decades about how the business model works, how long it takes to bring a vaccine to market, how much it costs, why that drug or that treatment or that device is so expensive to recoup the R&D costs, etc., etc., etc. We have all, and I'm sure a load of you who work in the healthcare profession on this call have probably written that statement or had to write that piece justifying why this is expensive. That has been completely blown out of the water now. If Mercedes and Ford and Land Rover can knock out ventilators, design and build a ventilator in 100 hours and start a production line off of them and start delivering them to critical workers, if Pharma can make PPE outfits, if Ineos can make sanitizer cream lotion within a couple of days, I think the health industry's biggest enemy could be itself when it comes to misinformation. How does it communicate in a time when you have got new people come into it? If you're a device manufacturer and you are trying to talk about your product and service when you're competing against the Mercedes or the McLaren Formula One team, who have just, have brought one to market. Now, I know the background, it's not as simple as that, etc., etc., but I think to illustrate your point is that before the industry gets too worried about dealing with misinformation from external sources, I think it has to look at how it potentially ensures that it becomes a trusted source, because that's how you counter disinformation. You become the trusted source. But I think the industry as a whole needs to also look at how, what does it need to do to repair any legacy damage? And actually, is it a trusted source? Are your experts trusted? What legacy issues have you got within the industry that you're still mopping up, whether it's over the price of generic drugs or a medical device that maybe didn't deliver when it came to market, all of these things. So the simple way of dealing with disinformation is actually becoming the trusted source and having reasons why people should trust you. But obviously that means you've got to make sure that your brand is trusted in the first place. So I think this is going to be a really crucial part for this health industry, and it's been the crux. This will be what will judge COVID-19, is that those health organisations that come out of this as a trusted source that did the right thing, that met all the requirements of government and consumer, were being seen to support the environment and society as a whole will come out of this very strong, and they'll be able to deal with disinformation. But I think those that have not dealt with legacy issues and do not communicate in a clear and transparent way are going to have some fundamental issues as a brand moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, you know, both of you touched on some examples of people who are getting it right. But, you know, another example springs to mind of, you know, obviously a pharma company who tried to, or did register their medicine as a treatment for COVID-19 as an orphan drug before it had really hit the peak of, you know, affecting people in the US. And, you know, obviously the backlash from that was so extreme because it, you know, it was a prime example of people saying, you know, that's big pharma just trying to get as much money as possible during this time. And they actually, you know, retracted the application for that due to all of the bad PR. And so I guess, you know, obviously there's still risks associated with, you know, with companies that are trying to capitalize on this opportunity. So I think it seems like, you know, obviously we need to be careful about, from a comm side, about towing the line of, you know, we have companies, a lot of companies that have treatments that can help, but that needs to be done in a sensitive way that isn't seen as, you know, money hungry or, you know, the classic kind of like pharma reputational issues that you touched on, Duncan. Did you have anything that to say around that, you know, kind of towing that line, either of you?
Harold, I'm happy for you. I think I've had my rant about the health industry.
I must admit I'd be speaking out of turn with regards to the pharma piece specifically. So I'll respectfully yeah.
I might pivot for you, Harold, on something that you mentioned around like the empathy, like the role of comms in helping advertisers with kind of how we're framing things with empathy and problem solving rather than just like the hard sell. So I guess, do you want to speak on that a little bit? Because I think that's a great opportunity for comms people in terms of working more closely with either the ad agency, your client's advertising agency, or your creative teams in making sure that you're getting that kind of tone of voice right.
Yeah, I think the exciting observation is that the focus of a campaign perhaps is less about inspiring and being aspirational and more around utility. How useful are you being? Every time you now represent a piece of content on a news feed, and you are wedged between something from the World Health Organization and something and the NHS. So you need to kind of show why you're in front of me and add value, real tangible value. We've seen it on YouTube with vloggers who typically would maybe post about travel and about riding in a great car, and suddenly it's home workouts. Suddenly it is making immune boosting smoothies. There's a refreshing pivot there. Now, of course, they need to toe a line between trying to be helpful and giving false information, but the focus around being empathetic to the person who wants actual useful information is promising, and I hope it carries on.
Great. And I think we're getting towards the end of the time that we've got. So I just wanted to ask both of you, and thank you so much for your time, but if you had one key takeaway for our audience tonight, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Harold, and then we can go to Duncan.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose the one takeaway, and I hope it's applicable away from our core role, is let's try not to make assumptions. Let's try and continuously revisit what we think is happening, what people are doing. They're not predictable, rational robots. They are humans, and they change very quickly according to culture, according to personality, according to what they see. So let's really, really respond to that so we can help ourselves, help them, help our organization. And thanks very much. This has been really, really informative. Learned a lot. And as mentioned, really hope to connect with a few people and learn from you and your respective spaces after this.
Duncan, same question.
I'm probably going to get into an awful lot of trouble with this, but I can really summarize it really simply. And excuse my language, and I don't mean to be offensive for the sake of it, but I can sum it up really simply in 3 words, is don't be, or 4 words even, don't be a dick. I can honestly say that is what consumers don't need at the moment. They need you to communicate in an honest, transparent way that actually is going to help them enhance. There is people facing unemployment. There is horribly people who are having to deal with death in their family, bereavement, they haven't been able to get in for their cancer treatment. All of these things are ongoing. If you are responsible or working with a brand, don't act like a dick. Be conscious of the environment you're operating. Be aware of what's happening. Don't let your own brand ethos overtake the requirements of your customers. And I think if you use that as a guiding star, as a North Star, you'll be okay through this. Sorry to be very use inappropriate language, but I feel sometimes you just have to get to the point on these things.
No, fair enough, and I think it's a good reminder for everyone, that that we should be thinking clearly, and just really just comes down to the basics, right? But thank you guys both for your time. Before everyone leaves, we've got a few words from Kiri from PRCA and Matt, my co-chair for the health group. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen and hand it over to Kiri.
Hi guys, thanks for coming today. It's been a great event, learned a lot. So I would like to talk about our international summit, which is coming up in May. Some great speakers. Feel free to drop me a line. I will drop my email in the chat box if you'd like to know more. Next slide please. And yeah guys, we've got 50% off our PRCA training in April and May. Feel free again to drop me an email, or you can go to the website link which is displayed on the screen. And yeah, thanks guys for joining, and thanks for the health group, crisis group, and thanks for the speakers too. It's been a lovely time.
Great, and Matt's just going to say a few words really quickly as well.
Indeed. So first of all, thank you, Duncan and Harold, for joining us and giving us such an interesting and insightful presentation. Now us to sort of understand that landscape and where the opportunities are for our clients. We also wanted to thank Relio, our sponsor, the comprehensive media database, helping public relations and public affairs, people with insights and tools to really help them do their jobs better. And finally, I just want to thank the remainder of you for joining us tonight, for giving us your questions and really contributing to this conversation. We really hope this has whetted your appetite for events, and you'll be interested in joining another one with us again soon. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks guys.
Thank you all. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.